Hey everyone, Plausible Josh here again. I'm here to take you through the experience of watching every episode of CWverse television, starting with Arrow and making my way through, well, everything. This is Power Through the CWverse. On this episode, we'll be covering Arrow Season 1, Episode 4, An Innocent Man.
Previously on Arrow.
How am I supposed to stay away from you if you won't stay away from me?
John Diggle. He'll be accompanying you from now
I
on.
think I'm just beginning to understand the kind of man you are.
We open by expanding on the cliffhanger in the last episode, which is Oliver revealing himself as the Hood to Diggle. This does not go over well with Diggle, and he starts swinging, calling Ollie a murderer and a vigilante. Ollie still wants Diggle in on this whole the Hood thing, but Diggle storms off and quits being Ollie's bodyguard. Ollie then gets back to his house where Laurel is there worried sick. Ollie tries to continue to be a standoffish asshole to put some distance between himself and everyone around him, which he's really struggling with now. We then get treated to some Flashback Island, where we see that the Flashback Cave is pretty decked out with homemade survival stuff, and the Flashback Archer provides Ollie with a bird to, presumably, kill and eat. Back in the present, Ollie sees some news footage that helps him get focused back on the list. Peter Declan, a death row inmate, being found guilty of killing his wife, Camille Declan. Camille works for Jason Brodeur, some rich asshole on the list. This gets Ollie's gears turning, so he decides the Hood needs to go talk to Ollie's favorite lawyer, Laurel. As an aside, there's a scene here where Ollie and Thea are hanging out after Ollie has a bad Flashback Island nightmare. Thea points out that Ollie has been mean and pushing people away since he's come back, which is absolutely 100% true, do not get me wrong. It's obvious that sometimes Oliver's playing up the selfish rich asshole persona, and sometimes he's just an asshole. But something that's not brought up is how dickish everyone else has been to him. Thea's done a complete 180 from episodes 2 and 3, not being intentionally mean to Ollie like she was in the club of the last episode. On top of that, everyone in the Queen household has been wildly pushy and mean to Ollie, as if 5 years surviving on an island was a cakewalk and will have no lasting traumatic effects. In previous episodes, his family was even really rude about Ollie not being ready to open up about his island experience, which is obviously traumatic to him. And a lot of the narrative focuses on how that's Ollie's fault somehow. It doesn't quite work out, and I can't tell if it's an intentional pressure they're putting on Ollie narratively, or if it's just that the writing is tossing that whole thing to the side. Anyways, the Hood tells Laurel the big idea. He wants to make sure that Brodeur pays for what he's done, not only to the Declans, but everyone in Starling City. The cops and law obviously can't hold Brodeur accountable without some outside interference, so the Hood will be that outside interference. Laurel goes to Iron Heights and talks to Declan, who mentions that his wife Camille blew the whistle on Brodeur, intentionally dumping chemicals where he shouldn't. Laurel takes this back to Cop Dad to see what the cops obviously missed, which is that Matt Ishtook lied about being told about the whole chemical dumping thing. Meanwhile, there's something fishy going on at Queen Consolidated. Walter discovers a $2.6 million discrepancy in their accounting, some money that just seemed to up and vanish. Moira does assure Walter that actually the money went to some startup and is totally fine. Please don't investigate this further. Back to Ollie. He's met up with Diggle at Big Belly Burger to talk to him about being the Hood. Since there weren't a swarm of cops outside the Queen household when Diggle quit, Ollie assumes that on some level Diggle is interested in what Ollie is doing as the Hood. Ollie then opens up about the list, his dad's death, and Ollie's motives for being the Hood to try and convince Diggle to join him. An aside, it's very cool how much Ollie just trusts Diggle right now. Diggle is the first to know about how Ollie's dad didn't die on the island, but instead on the boat to the island. It really shows a lot of trust to be that vulnerable with that info, something he's not telling Laurel, Thea, Mariah, Walter, or that punk Tommy Merlin. They're really building Diggle as a core component of Team Arrow, which is awesome. It all flows very naturally so far, and it's nice that there is someone that Ollie can just confide in. To mention, as a viewer, it's nice to have the superhero not have to be hidden with everyone, and means we don't always have to have Ollie narrating to himself when he plans his attacks. He can now bounce off of Diggle and have better scenes that set up the Hood's plans. The Hood catches up with Laurel, who informs him that Ishtook lied. The Hood decides to threaten a confession out of Ishtook by tying him to train tracks. Ishtook reveals that there's a whole file on the chemical dumping, which the Hood gets and provides to Laurel. Dad Cop, however, is pretty peeved about this whole thing, as Laurel lied to him to get the Istok lead and work with the Hood to get this info. In the end, it doesn't really matter, as the judge Laurel takes this new evidence to decides that an important witness lying to influence a jury isn't a big deal, so Declan just stays on death row. As that's all happening, stepdad Walter gets Felicity's help with the $2.6 million issue. Felicity figures out this is all shell company nonsense. The $2.6 million wasn't being used in a startup like Moira said, and all that money was being put into a warehouse in Starling City under the shell company named Tempest. The Hood and Laurel take the Declan news in two different ways. Laurel goes to the prison Declan's being held in, Iron Heights, to try and use any legal proceedings they can to get the execution stopped. The Hood, on the other hand, shoots the CEO through the hand to try and get a confession, but instead learns the CEO is going to have Laurel and Declan killed at Iron Heights. The Hood then treats Iron Heights as a hitman level to stop the plan, where you have a bunch of plots clash and set off a bit of a domino effect. Real quick, before I talk about this next part, I have to talk about this hilarious transition I wrote down in my notes. Diggle is talking to Carly, his sister-in-law, about wanting to do something more than be a bodyguard for rich assholes. He's not saying, I want to work for the Hood, but Diggle's doing that thing where characters generalize their issues so they can talk about it with someone else. He's worried doing this thing, again, that Carly doesn't know about, working for the Hood, is wrong, to which Carly says, John, if you believe in something, how can it be wrong? We immediately cut to the Hood threatening a CEO after that.
Yeah, what if it's wrong?
John, if you believe in something, how can it be wrong?
Jason Brodeur!
What do you want?
Okay, back to the plot clash. First, the Hood saves Laurel and Declan. Second, the Hood almost kills one of the people trying to kill Laurel. Third, Laurel's scared by the shocking amount of violence and completely turns on the Hood. Fourth, the Hood overhears Laurel telling Cop Dad that she doesn't like the Hood anymore because he just wants to kill people, which gives us another trip to Flashback Island where we learn that Ollie only learned how to kill at all because it was the only way to survive on Flashback Island. Fifth, Laurel tells Cop Dad that the Hood just wore a ski mask in Iron Heights while explaining to Cop Dad that she can't trust the Hood anymore, which Cop Dad picks up on. Sixth, we'll get back to this. Now let's wrap up some other things. Stepdad Walter goes and checks out the warehouse Mariah's shell company Tempest brought, which is the wrecked yacht Queen's Gambit housed inside. Because of the fallout of the Iron Heights and CEOs running with the Hood, Declan is free and reunites with his daughter. Moira meets with Captain Jack Harkness from Doctor Who, where they figure out the Hood is going after people on the list. Ollie meets up with Diggle, who has agreed to be on Team Green Arrow. Then, suddenly,
Oliver Queen, what is this? You can't just barge in here.
Yeah? Well, I got a badge and a gun that say different.
Hey, what the hell's going on?
Detective Ross.
Oliver Queen, you're under arrest on suspicion of obstruction of justice, aggravated assault,
Walter, stop that!
trespassing, acting as a vigilante. Are you out of your mind? And murder.
You have the right to remain silent if you give up.
oh yeah. Sixth, Cop Dad figures out Ollie is the Hood. I think this is my favorite episode of Arrow yet. Firstly, we get no Tommy Merlin in it, which means it's miles ahead of any of the other episodes where I have to look at Tommy Merlin. He is, so far, a useless, silly character who could never be mentioned again after this episode, and I'd be 100% okay with that. This episode also felt really well paced. Outside of the usual Flashback Island issues, there was lots of focus on moving the plot forward, and then I think the pieces falling into place after the Iron Heights action scene is really well done. It's great that they treat Cop Dad as someone who is always trying to solve the puzzle, so when he gets the ski mask info, he instantly knows to look into things that happened last episode. It's hilarious that Ollie has already been caught and is absolutely 1,000,000% shown to be the Hood, but hey, that's a very funny corner to have to write yourself out of 4 episodes into your television show. Going a little off script here because I completely forgot to write this before I started recording. I think that a lot of the small character scenes are really good. There's a lot of Diggle and Carly talking to each other that's not really moving the plot forward, but is definitely opening Diggle up to the audience, letting you see what Diggle's thought process is like, and you really see that like he just wants to do good, and he wants to do good for the city, the world, whatever. is his main thing. As I mentioned earlier, I want to say in the pilot episode, I really enjoy small scenes like that where you're not necessarily moving plot forward, you're moving characters forward, and you're giving them more screen time to just kind of exist and be real people. If someone asks me to go help a vigilante, you know I'm going to talk to someone about that, and I'm going to try and get to the core of why I would even want to join them, if that was something I was feeling. Back to my script. I don't really have anything negative to say about this episode. There's some things I particularly find a little silly about this episode that would likely not bother anyone else, but I'm going to talk about them anyway. Laurel in this episode is very anti-killing and anti-vigilanteism, which is fine. It's a superhero story, it comes with the territory, I don't really mind that much. However, she asks why the Hood is hiding his face, which is just a supremely silly question for her specifically to be asking. First off, the current thing Laurel and the Hood are working on is a case where a wife was killed by a CEO's hired goons, and the husband was framed for that murder so he could die in prison. Laurel has also been working several cases that the Hood has been involved in where CEOs are also attempting to kill or harm other people to cover up the CEO's misdeeds. It's painfully obvious why anyone will wear a mask when they're doing vigilante violence against asshole CEOs in Starling City. The other thing is that Laurel's "the Hood just wants to kill people" issue, and why she can't trust the Hood, is verbalized to her dad. Her dad, who is a cop dad. Laurel's not really depicted as anti-cop. She doesn't seem to dislike that her dad is a cop. And I'm just going to assume that the real world issues with cops exist in the CWverse, so is she just fine with it if the Hood had a badge or what? Obviously not every character is 1,000,000,000% rational all the time, 100% of the time. Of course. It wouldn't be an interesting show if that were the case, but these two things just really stuck out to me. Anyways, issues like that aside, it's a good episode. It makes me want to see where we go from here. How does Ollie get out of being caught on camera suiting up as the Hood? How does Moira deal with this? Is he just known as the Hood now? No secret identity? Guess I'll have to find out next week. I hope you enjoyed me talking about Arrow this week. What did you think of this episode? What was your favorite moment? Do you disagree with my character analysis? You should tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking the video and subscribing. If you want to see us produce more content like this, consider subscribing to our Patreon. We're currently working towards our first Patreon goal. Check out the description for more info. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time, and good night, everyone.